Sebastian Vettel has announced his retirement. I've only just found out this myself, actually. So if you don't know about it yet, you're in good company. But yes, so that changes a lot of things. We'll be talking about that tonight here on Full Course Yellow. We're also going to chat about what's happening in the world of supercars. Has the bubble burst? We're going to find out a little bit later on in the show. And we'll just talk about what's a huge weekend of motorsport online. There's motorsport everywhere. We said there's Formula One, there's supercars, there's the Spa 24 hours. There's a whole bunch of stuff happening at Spa as well as the 24 hours, and most of it is being streamed live as well, including some classic action from the history of GT1, GT2, and going through to GT3. So all of that stuff is happening over the weekend, but let's, as I said, I got in late. I only just literally sat down and suddenly found out that, Sebastian Vettel has apparently announced his retirement, effective at the end of this year, and we'll find out about it with some of our regulars. Chris is with us again, as is Doc. Dave Stillwell is with us, Richard Outram and Peter Johnson. And Pete, we might start with you. You were the one, you've been keeping up with all of this stuff. What's the situation with Sebastian Vettel? Because as I said, I haven't seen anything, I only just got in.
He just said he's enjoyed his time, and he mentioned the few people he's worked with, and that he wants to spend, now that he's a father, he obviously wants to spend more time with his family, and he'll retire at the end of the year.
That's interesting because it obviously opens up sort of some spots we were talking about, like in terms of what happens with Oscar Piastri and what happens with Dan Ricciardo, and there was some talk about, could if Sebastian did end up going, because it still looks like Fernando Alonso's going nowhere. Fernando's put up his hand and saying that basically he wants 2 years. Alpine apparently want him for one, and then perhaps transition him into the World Endurance Championship campaign for 2024. But he's saying no, he wants a 2-year. He wants a 2-year contract, so that'll be interesting. But this opens up opportunities now for not just for Oscar Piastri, but possibly if Dan Ricciardo does leave or is pushed aside at McLaren, that could he end up at Aston Martin? What does anybody think?
I think it would be an even further backward step than the steps he's made, like with Renault and McLaren. I think it would be a further backward step based on their results this year.
Yeah, and that's of course depending on what happens in the future of Aston Martin. I mean, there's increasingly been rumours going around that perhaps Daddy Stoll has decided that spending all of this money to prop up his son's Formula One career, perhaps there might be better ways, particularly during an economic crisis, that there might be better things to spend his money on long term. We've got the story that broke yesterday overnight regarding Porsche buying a 50% share in Red Bull Technologies to partner up with Red Bull and for the future, for a sort of Red Bull Porsche connection for when the new regulations come in. There's been rumours around that the other part of that equation, Audi, might be interested in getting involved and buying into a team, whether it's Sauber. But Aston Martin's also been listed as one that they might be interested in as well. So I don't know. I mean, it's going to be hard, but it just came out of the blue that I think Sebastian's obviously been looking at it for a while. But Dave, what do you think? What does it look like next year without Sebastian Vettel?
I'd say that this further entrenches Fernando Alonso as the next cab off the rank, who will need to have a very stern look at how long they continue to be part of the paddock for. If nothing else, I'm not sure if you caught his appearance on the UK version of Q&A, what they call Question Time, where he was invited on, and he gave quite a lot of sage, wise, and well-reasoned comments and contributions to the panel. But I think particularly if we go back to the British Grand Prix where he raced, Nigel Mansell's, was it in 1992, 1993, number 5 Williams. He's made a big push for environmental and social justice causes. And I think, when you combine that with his young family, he hasn't had the opportunity to do a Nico Rosberg and do a win the world championship, drop the mic and walk out the door. Unfortunately, he's obviously stepped away from Red Bull to Ferrari to now Aston Martin, and he's seen his ability to compete for podiums and wins shrink dramatically over the last couple of years. I'd say there's not much more opportunity to compete at the highest level of the sport, and he's got many other things on his plate that he could be investing his time and energy in. If nothing else, I look forward to hopefully some more race without trace appearances or conversions of, historical motorsport vehicles to race on carbon neutral fuels in the future. Because if we want to keep doing what we do with things that make lots of noise, it's the kind of technology that we'll need.
The interesting thing is going to be that, as you say, he's been involved in that. When you consider the path that the World Endurance Championship is going in, as well, including the fact that even though it's been put back a year, the ACO is still talking very heavily about the opportunity of having a dedicated hydrogen class in, I think, 2025. So under the circumstances, that might be an area he could be interested in as well if he's looking to sort of keep up a motorsport involvement, but also follow his interest in renewable energy and a cleaner planet.
Absolutely. But as I say, we always say that the silly season gets started earlier and earlier. We haven't even had the summer break yet in Formula One, and already the silly season mumblings and murmurings of horse trading. It's not just horse trading of drivers; it's horse trading of engine and technology partners.
Like I said, I haven't seen any of the stories that are going around. Obviously, it's come. I mean, it's not a total shock. I suppose the timing of the announcement is a bit of a surprise. But I mean, Pete or anybody else, Doc or anybody that's been having a look at online about what's being said, what are some of the rumours going around at the moment? Has there been any talk amongst the mainstream media regarding who might be the favourites to replace him?
I think it's just pretty much a lot of well wishes as a majority at the moment, I suppose, as across the board, and a few memories. Not too much criticism really, because obviously he's finished. He's been very respectful and a lot more sincere about his racing for a little while now, and has put things in perspective to a certain extent. So yeah, he's getting a lot of well wishes. I did see just before we went on air that one of the major news outlets were running driver reactions from Formula One on a live blog as well too. So if you want to Dr. Google that out there, and while you're listening to us or watching us and on your own device, have a look at that. So as you said though, Brett, it's no shock. I mean, I don't think he's been pushed out the door. There's been some conversations, and obviously, I'm sure he wouldn't want to go. Going back to what you said about Alonso before, though, he's always been a little bit more stubborn than your average Formula One driver, not just on the track either. So I think with Alonso, as everyone's probably agreed, the next cap off the rank, it's a bit of a juggling act. I mean, you're not just going to look at whether he just wants to keep on racing. As you said before, as everyone's been saying all year, there's new talent come through and there's not enough bums on seats to be able to provide them. You've got what he contributes in experience and technology, updating with the technology and feedback from the track and from the car long term. So they've probably got so many different thoughts and areas to think about with Alonso on what's beneficial for him, the team, drivers, testing, cars, development that's going to be happening, the new rules. There's so I mean, you've really got to probably, as far as management goes, sit down with Fernando and say, right, it's not just about you, it's not just about the team. There's all these other facets of the industry that we need to discuss when it comes regarding your future. And they need to have a calm and rational discussion about it, and not one get any hot-headed or pig-headed about it.
The interesting thing might be if Alpine decide that they're very firm on just giving him the 1 year extension to the contract, where he demands to, whether he would whether Alonso would be prepared to sort of, put up his hand and try and walk away from it with the idea that he could go and replace Vettel at Aston Martin. But I don't think that'd be a good move for Aston Martin to take, one veteran driver who's retiring for another one who will retire sort of at the end of next year or the year after, one way or the other. I mean, he's competitive at the moment. He's certainly, performing well under the circumstances, but he can't last forever, and at some stage, they'll be looking for someone younger, and that depends on if the Stoll family continue, because Lance is. I think Daddy's getting a bit tired of some of Lance's lack of progress through the field. I think that he might be getting a bit bored with it now, and there are rumours going around that he's having a good look at the possibility of trying to find some buyers for that team. Anyway,
I did hear,
go on, Richard.
Yeah, I did hear one very interesting story in the pre-race show at IndyCar last weekend, that the commentators saying that Herta had actually been signed by Zach Brown for the F1 McLaren team. And I'm going, well, there's only one seat which could possibly become available for them to have done that. So, yeah.
But if we're looking at how many people are signed to the McLaren Academy, I'm fairly certain that next week I'll be announcing I'm driving for McLaren. Peter, you're driving for McLaren as well. They're also going to announce. They're also going to announce a new air race program. Richard, you'll be announced as a driver there, and they're also going to start a suburban street racing program as well. And Brett, you're going to be tapped on the shoulder for that as well.
I'm rewrapping the gets as we speak.
Actually, wait. That's Zach Brown. That's Zach Brown calling me now. Sorry, guys, got to go.
Oh yeah, all right. That's likely.
I hope we're not going to have to, Brett. I hope we're not sharing the same room.
Everyone's pictures just slowly dropping off the thing. Everyone's going bing, 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 bing. Everyone's going. There you go.
I think it's going to be like sort of, like when I was growing up in the days of the last days of the Vietnam War, when you'd get the knock on the door and, you get the telegram saying, the Governor General and the Government of Australia basically invites you to be a part of the war effort. That it'll be you'll get something from. You'll get something from Zach Brown saying, I'm sorry, you've been called up to be a driver at McLaren.
Everyone's been conscripted to McLaren.
A little bit of international service.
Yes, I think.
Although you wouldn't want to be an IndyCar wheel changer at the moment.
Mm.
No, well, that's always a risky business. But apparently, he's on the mend for AJ Foyt's team. So. So he's on the mend, so that's happening. But yeah, it's interesting to see what was happening, as I said, for the in putting the show together. I'm wondering with Daniel Ricciardo what the future is, because it just seems now that there's almost this this unholy push, particularly by the British media and some elements of the British media, to really sort of circle. They're sniffing blood in the water and they're circling around. Because I was watching Tiff Nadell's podcast, Love Cars on the
media.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, and you would think that with the way they were talking, that he was struggling to outqualify Nicholas Latifi, and he was putting it into the wall every 5 minutes, and had written off half a dozen cars, and it's like, why are they keeping Ricciardo around? Well, just get rid of him now. I mean, he's finished. He's out. And why have people turned so badly? I mean, yes, he's not as fast. We know that he's not doing as well as Lando is at the moment. But and he's
Let's bring it back in perspective. You've got three teams: Red Bull, Ferrari, Mercedes. Mercedes is slightly off the pace at the moment. They're admitting they've got a power insufficiency. So let's put it back to those three teams. If you're not the number one driver, so-called number one driver in those three teams. If you're number two driver, or you're on the seesaw, you think you may be number one, the other driver thinks you're number one, doesn't matter, number two. At some stage while you're driving into your contract with those teams, you're going to think the grass is greener, or would I be better off going somewhere else, or they're offering me more money, or I think this team's going to be the next top three teams that's going to be running in for a championship. And that's what's Daniel's obviously gone through his head. That's what's gone through some of the other drivers' heads as they're getting a bit long in the tooth as well too. There's only a couple of spots in those top 2 or 3 teams that are going to get you at the end of World Championships at the end of the year. It's not going to happen like it was with Ross Brawn back years and years ago, taking over a team and turning it upside down and getting a World Championship within 12 months, 2 years. So unfortunately, that's just where it sits. And that's what Daniel's done. He's flipped to 2 teams. It hasn't quite worked out to the best. He was probably hoping McLaren or obviously Renault were going to be up the top of the thing and maybe challenging for the top couple of teams. And there's going to be there is a pecking order. And unfortunately, you've just got to play politics sometimes.
I think in hindsight, I mean, his biggest mistake was probably leaving Renault. I mean, I can understand why he left Red Bull, even though sort of, Helmut Marko sort of, like said, well, he should have stayed and fought it out and, duelled it out with Max and show that he was as good. And I can see that point as well. But, he moved to Renault where he was, the clear leader in the team. He was out qualifying Ocon on a regular basis. And then suddenly, for whatever reason, he just up and left. He, took the money at McLaren and probably thought, oh well, I'll just do the same thing. I'll take all my experience and I'll move into a team with this young driver, and it'll be a bit, it'll be basically the same as Renault. I'll be the number one man. And I'll bring through this young kid. Well, it turns out the young kid is a really, really good driver and probably considerably better than Esteban Ocon, whose name is coming up in the French media as being someone who's not guaranteed to be in his position, perhaps in long term into the future.
Yeah, unfortunately for Ocon, he doesn't bring much in the way of a commercial package with him. As we would have seen when he did spend a couple of years out in the wilderness, he was there as a Mercedes test driver. I believe he's also managed by Toto Wolff. So it's always fascinating to look at the machinations inside the F1 paddock about who races for who, but who's managed by who, and where their junior pathway might have led, but where their management pathway might be taking them. I think the Porsche commitment into Red Bull is also worthy of a highlight before we move off Formula One.
50%.
If nothing else, it certainly, for me, it certainly is interesting that Porsche's putting that much energy and focus into Formula One, whilst at the same time they've also committed to both a WEC and an IMSA campaign with their LMDH car through Porsche.
But Stilly, isn't it surprising, Stilly, that Red Bull are allowing them to own 50% of it as well too?
Well, you've got to figure out. I need to go back. I need to do like that segment that Eve Hewitt does with Hindy, where they go through the company's house diagram of who owns what percentage of who and who does what. So they've bought a 50% stake in, is it Red Bull Technologies?
Technologies, yeah.
Yes, right. Which is not the Formula One team.
It's is the chassis, yes.
Yeah.
Well, the engine.
No, that's Red Bull Powertrains.
Oh, right, okay. Yeah.
Yeah, so I am very much looking forward to someone drawing the diagram of which shell company is responsible for which, will play the
who owns Sauber at the moment, Stilly?
The finance company that I think Marcus Ericsson brought with him, isn't it?
Oh, okay. Yep. Which is
well, they're another team that they've got the deal with Alfa Romeo, but there was another team that they looked at as possibly a candidate for Audi to become involved, because that's the other half of the equation. I mean, we know that it's not just Porsche; it's Audi as well, and so
VW is trying to put a finger in all the pies.
Yeah, who despite the popular rumours, while those organisations are very seriously linked, they're not actually part of the same company. If you want to talk about shadowy shareholdings, there's a very intriguing book about the Volkswagen Group and how the Porsche family is involved with it, particularly in the wake of Dieselgate. But what I find is that's the fascinating thing, is that Porsche's committed to Porsche Penske Motorsport in IMSA and in the WEC, and making customer cars. Audi was on the same team getting the Multimatic chassis, potentially with some other form of engine, and the handbrake's been pulled on that program. but yet they still haven't made a commitment to the WEC or IMSA. They continue to hose down speculation, as does that. Oh, they're buying out 50% of McLaren. Oh, no, they're not. Oh, they're buying out Sauber. Oh, no, they're not. So I think
what you're saying
the
is
Audi
the
step,
two of us
what
need to get
happens with
together and
Audi,
actually look at some of these guys behind the scenes and find out who's making these decisions, because we're all you're talking about all these situations and who's doing them all like that, but really we need to get to the bottom of it. We need to find out who's making these decisions behind the scenes.
Yeah. So I think what will be really interesting, the driver market is one thing, but now obviously the FIA, the World Motorsport Council, has delivered some of its decisions regarding the 2026 engine package rules. That's what allowed Porsche to announce, oh, by the way, we're buying 50% stake in Red Bull Technologies. But I think what you'll start to see is a lot more movement in the commercial side of the sport. And, the question mark that continues to hang in the background is how long can Michael Andretti keep himself out of the sport? He's now that obviously Formula One has these cost cap regulations in place and they've got a good commercial revenue stream, the value of a Formula One team and the Formula One team entry into the sport has skyrocketed massively in the last couple of years, where, someone could come in and buy an F1 team on the cheap. These days, it's not just about buying the team and the facilities. It's about buying into the revenue stream that Liberty Media can generate for you. So I think to wrap up on Formula One, I think, yes, absolutely. Farewell, Seb. Thanks for your time and all the best with your future ventures. He'd be a perfect candidate for a German manufacturer to have in a sports car program. Just like his idol Michael Schumacher was a driver for a German sports car brand.
And there's a couple of them now, because BMW have finally made it official and announced that they're going to be joining the World Endurance Championship as well. They'd already announced the IMSA package, but they said they would certainly be looking down the track at getting involved with the WEC. But it looks like they're going to jump in a bit earlier than planned. They've made the firm commitment now, and that car is out testing right now.
Good pick of the car too. I saw that.
Yeah, so it's so that's interesting. And once again, there's still rumours around of other manufacturers getting involved as well. I mean, I know that if you listen to Graham Goodwin and Marshall Pruitt on their week in sports cars and some of the stuff that's coming out of Radio Le Mans, out of Radio Show Limited, there's certainly plenty of strong rumours around that there are more manufacturers pretty much just waiting for the right time to jump in and join the rest of them as well. So,
but no one wants to let Colin Collars turn up with his van.
Yes, yeah, he's got a car sitting there. I mean, with a famous name that he perhaps doesn't have the rights to use. But either way, I mean, it's a nice looking car. It's a pretty green.
It's got the right stickers on it.
It's got stickers on it.
Car on the side.
Yes,
without going too much back into it, I think we all need. I'm going to start digging into VW and who's making all these decisions behind the scenes, because every week we seem, there's a little bit of news about this, a little bit of news about that. Like what Stilly and I were just talking. I reckon we need some names. What?
Piek and Porsche. I'll see if I can find the title of the book that I borrowed off my dad a few years ago. This was just after Dieselgate. The genesis of that company, in particular, its transition both before and after World War II, is quite intricate in terms of which families controlled what, because Volkswagen itself is also partially owned by the regional government that looks after Wolfsburg, effectively the city in which Volkswagen is based. So it's a story that's multi-layered between private groups, public investment, to a degree of national pride or nationalisation, and then you've got Porsche off to the side that owns this. It's each have got a bite of the apple in the other one. If you thought the Supercars ownership with ARG and Race was a little bit complicated, wait until you delve into who owns what at VW.
Yeah, well, that's what we want to do, VW.
Yeah, the BMW announcement was rather odd for me, because if we look at BMW's engagement in sports car, or at least GTE sports car racing and prototype racing for the last 20 years, it has been substantially focused on America. The money behind the homologation of the GTE version or the GT2 version of the E92 M3 was primarily funded through BMW North America to race in the IMSA series. The follow-on Z4 GTE, the M6 GTE, and then the the Z4 GTLM, the M6 GTLM, and then the M8 GTE, the big boy that had all the memes made about it. Even though that program ended in the WEC, it was still strongly supported on both a commercial basis and a fan engagement basis in the IMSA series. BMW North America very much committed to motorsport and sports car racing as part of their marketing message. So initially the discussions were, no, we're going to build an LMDH or a DPI 2.0. We're going to race in IMSA. There wasn't any discussion about a WEC program. There hasn't been discussion about customer cars yet, but I will be very interested to see what happens in that space, particularly given that Dallara is building the spine underneath and doing most of the development work for BMW alongside at the same time for Cadillac. Again, a GM brand that is predominantly focused on an IMSA campaign, both whether it be prototype racing or with GT racing with the Corvette. And as Le Mans and the ACO switch from a GTE formula to GT3 or GT3 Plus in 2024, the whole complexion of how brands are engaged in sports car racing, both GT racing and prototype, is going to be a massive wake up. And we finally got some confirmation that Renault Alpine will be committing to was it an LMDH or a LMH car for 2024?
I think it's an LMH. I think it's a hypercar.
It was a hyper. It wasn't
self-designed.
Yeah.
And all the while, we keep seeing this new generation of DPI cars or LMDH cars that are ostensibly based on an LMP of a future LMP2 chassis, and yet no one's said anything yet about where's the next generation of LMP2 cars.
Yeah, well, I think they're sort of forcing the hand, really, because, I mean, if they're going to design these cars, they've basically been given a bit of a blank sheet to say, we'll design the cars and we'll sort of fit them into the we'll work out how they fit into LMP2 further down the track, because right now, the current situation is LMP2 is doing very, very well all over the world.
It's doing really well.
For Orica, but that's the only weakness at the moment, is that they allowed a number of chassis in, but there's only one that anybody wants, so that is competitive. So they'll be hoping obviously to have a bit more variety in LMP2 as well when they open up the regulations for that. But at the moment, I don't think they're in any mad hurry at the moment, because there's no shortage of cars out there, and there's no shortage of people who want to race them. And the ones that are currently running around, when the new regulations come in, will probably end up in things like the Asian Le Mans series, and we might end up seeing a few more of them out this way as well.
Yeah, well, certainly that was one of the things that came up on this week's episode of On the Grid from our friends at the Race Talk. Richard Crail doing an interview with Sam Shaheen, two proud parochial South Australians, where he revealed that obviously the 2020 visit for the Asian Le Mans series, I happened to be there, was one of the volunteer officials. It was an amazing first look for me at international prototype sports car racing. I wasn't fortunate enough to go visit the Race of 1,000 Years in Adelaide in 99, 2000. But I can tell you that Sam is very much committed to getting ACO racing back down under. I believe there's still a contract, from what he was saying, there's still a contract in place. And if not for the feeder category Asian Le Mans series, where it's LMP2, LMP3 and GT cars, I think we wouldn't object to the World Endurance Championship coming down under. And certainly the GT circuit would be well set up for all sorts of prototype cars. But, baby steps. We'll see what we can do to re-engage with an international audience.
Yeah, I think the last, fairly recently, I had some correspondence direct from the Asian Le Mans series saying that they were definitely committed long term. At the moment, everything is in such a state of flux around the world. Obviously, that they're focusing on just keeping the series based in the Middle East for at least the next one as well. But they have said that, certainly long term, yes, there is an agreement in place with the Bend, and certainly their long term plan would be to would certainly be to come back to Australia as soon as it's feasible, sometime in the future.
Still making talking about the moment of Vettel. I've got a quote that's just done by Lawrence Stroll just very recently in the last hour or two. We made it, and this is quote, we made it clear to Vettel that we wanted him to continue us next year, but in the end he has done what he feels is right for himself and his family, and of course we respect that. So he was a wanted man according to Lawrence next year. There you go.
Well, there you go. So that's interesting. Now, we did mention Supercars as well coming up this week at the Bend. They'll be in action over the weekend. We mentioned the Bend as well. So the interesting thing behind the scenes is we spoke briefly about last week. They had a bit of an offer on the table to buy them out apparently, and the interesting thing that has flared up, and Australian Auto Action and Bruce Williams have got right involved in this. And if you have a look at a very extensive article in this week's edition of Australian Auto Action, I mean, it's very text heavy. I mean, there's no it's not a lightweight piece of work. Ooh, so congratulations.
Well, let's get the motorsport photographers to take lots of photos of the bids on the table and a whole bunch of people on computer screens with mouses. Not exactly the dynamic, fast-paced environment that people are looking for. I've got to question how realistic that buyout offer is or was, because from the initial reports where they're suggesting that some unknown consortium out of Europe, within 6 months of the category being taken over, is going to come in and offer 20% over the odds on what people paid for. Does it sound a little bit too good to be true?
They're a media organisation as well too from Europe, not just
and they have very they basically sort of aggregating like a lot of major sporting events around the world for the purpose of providing content for media around the world, and they're involved in football, European football. They're involved in a number of different sports. I believe in some athletics and a bit of things like mixed martial arts. There's a number of things they're involved with, and they do apparently have some motorsport interests. I haven't exactly had time to look into it, but the interview or the quote that was given from the guy in charge of the company in Auto Action this week is basically saying, as far as he's concerned, the offer is very much still on the table. They're very interested in having an involvement in Supercars, whether it's a major involvement or a complete buyout or just having some say in the running of it. But what it's opened up, there's a couple of things that's opened up. One is the fact that financially a lot of money was brought in, and a lot of that money came from ARG and Gary Rogers Motorsport and Barry Rogers as well. And now Gary's come out. Gary's apparently sent off a letter to all of the teams and all the other shareholders, basically expressing his disappointment and admitting that the reason that ARG got involved was to try and bring all of the different elements together from within the ARG categories, TCR, Trans Am, S5000, and to get them involved so they could get onto the card and some of the blue ribbon events with the Supercars. And Gary and Barry are both saying we've been pretty much locked out of the discussions, and he doesn't have a lot of good words to say about Mr. Nettlefold. He doesn't seem to have a lot of good words to say about Mr. Scaife as well. So, that seems to be interesting.
Things haven't changed for over 20 years. Have they, Brett?
I was going to use those words, but in a different way.
Yeah, the more things change, the more they stay the same. I mean, it still wouldn't surprise me. I was really surprised when this came up, that that Foxtel didn't end up buying them, and it still wouldn't surprise me if they weren't involved pretty heavily if there was behind the scenes to get hold of it, because it's outside of the football, the two main football codes and the cricket. It is the sort of it's number 4 in terms of having content. It provides plenty of viewers. Not the sort of numbers you get for AFL or NRL, but still pretty well. Horse racing is, if you look at the numbers that actually watch horse racing, it's pretty small. I mean, there's lots of people betting on it, and they might have a bit of a look up at the sky. When they're in
most of the betting companies now have live streams.
As well, but in terms of if you didn't bet on horse racing, I mean, who would go? How many people would go to the horse racing? Because I just love to. I'm not interested in betting on it. I just love to watch. Just love horse racing. It's a gamble. It's a gambling thing.
People don't go to the Blue Ruban horse racing events to watch a bunch of small people whip some horses around on grass. They go there for the social atmosphere and to say that they went to the races.
Well,
a little bit like a lot of us go to motorsport events not to actually watch the cars go around, but to hang out with like-minded petrosexuals and go and geek and gander at some of the scantily clad metal and carbon on display.
I think
I'm different. I do go to actually watch the horses because I used to track ride back in my teenage years, ride horses, track.
Don't you mean? Yeah, back in my days, I used to track ride and go out there and do a little bit. Sandown was a lovely track, a bit bumpy down the back,
My balls did drop, fortunately, and I do go for watching, not the betting. I go for the social side that you mentioned, Stilly, and I go for the horses because I'm actually quite not a bad rider of the equines. So anyway, but that's just me.
When those descended, did you have to start riding side saddle with them? Did you ride left or right?
That's when I took up wearing a skirt. Yeah, exactly.
Oh, okay, right.
Speaking of we're right. Speaking of balls dropping and all sorts of manliness.
Just before you do those balls dropping. Back to the S5000s that we just brought up briefly. Did you see everyone? There's an open day for drivers.
Time to go dust the helmet off, hey, Richard?
Yeah.
S5000, September 17th. Open day for drivers, and anyone can book in.
Yeah, I tell you what, Dave. If you're interested, I reckon we can pull it off. I'll have a word with Barry
so long as the pedal box goes all the way down and they can cut all the foam out of the seat, so I can squeeze into it. I'll have a crack.
I reckon Barry Rogers. Barry has quote, I quote, said the cars are going to be more user friendly on the open day to drive, so they're going to be making some adjustments to them.
Yes. So rather than turned all the way up to 11, the Coyote's going to be turned up to only about 8.5.
Yes, I think so. But
great idea, actually.
Great idea, Richard.
Depending on where it is and when it is, we'll see what we can organise, because that could be a fun story for the show to get you behind.
I'm game.
I'll have a quick look where it is.
Brett, you can have a run.
I have enough trouble, as you well know. I have enough trouble getting in and out of the gets, let alone getting in and out of one of those bloody things. Let alone what one lap would do to my back. So, got that.
I'll have a look where it is.
Speaking of open wheelers, Mad Cow Mark has pointed out that coming up, congratulations to young Christian Mansell, who's going to make his Formula 3 debut this weekend at the Hungaro Ring. Christian's been doing very well, currently running second in the Euro Formula Open Series, which is a Formula 3, sort of the regional Formula 3, more closer to the old, what we would say is Formula 3 of old. And he's been doing very well there, and he's got a couple of drives coming up, and he's got a drive this weekend, and so fingers crossed for Christian as well, and another young Australian driver to look out for in the future. So let's Yeah, let's keep our fingers crossed. I've had a bit of correspondence with Christian, and we're going to try and catch up with him at some stage when the show comes back, when In Pit Lane comes back in early September on channel 31 in Melbourne. So we're going to catch up with him. Going to catch up with him there.
S5000 Open Day will be at the Bend, and quote Barry said the cars will be less intimidating.
Yes.
Okay.
So they'll take the spike off the steering wheel. Yeah, nice.
They'll
I would
put
say
wet weathers on instead of slicks.
Christian, of course, is Australia's second most famous Mansell in motorsport. Of course, the most famous Mansell in Australian motorsport, of course, is Lachlan Mansell, who, if you've been catching his Instagram feed, has been putting out reviews of the most recent episodes of the 2022 season of Channel 9's Beauty and the Geek. Have any of you been watching?
Surprisingly, no.
Wow.
Sorry, was I meant to?
What day and time is it on?
Yeah, no. Shout out to Lockie. Really appreciate the content, and really impressed by what you've been doing with the profile that you've got from one of those mainstream reality TV shows.
Pumping up his tyres.
Speaking of Lachlan Mansell, did anyone catch the Sydney 300 done all in one day at Sydney Motorsport Park on the weekend? It was live streamed by the Blendline crew, who indeed were actually entered in the event in a Nissan Pulsar, but they came a cropper in qualifying in some wet conditions at Sydney Motorsport Park and didn't get to make the race.
It shows how much they're getting paid to do the live streams if they can afford their own cars. No wonder people are paying $25,000 around.
Cameras in it. 20 in-car cameras in it on different angles. It was probably weighed down and lost control of it. One hit him in the head in the helmet and knocked him sideways.
But no, look, a really great to maybe give some of the grassroots categories a bit of love this weekend or this week's episode. Really great race to watch from Sydney. There is, of course, the Winton 300 coming up in November that will be administered by Terry Denovan from MRA. So if you've got an improved production car, a Super TT car, an MX-5, a Mark sports car, an HQ, a saloon car, a BMW E30, basically a Hyundai XL, basically anything with four wheels and a roof.
Tell us the ones that are excluded, not the ones included.
Yeah. Basically, no Carrera Cup cars, no GT3 cars, but this is the exact kind of race that you'd want to run in a GT4 car. We've seen a couple of guys run around in their Bathurst 6-hour 3E production cars. Free choice of tyres. So you can run slicks, you can run wets, you can run intermediates, you can run R-spec tyres. Bracket enduro, so broken down into lap times based on classes. 5-minute pit stops to cut down on the no need for dry brake refueling methods. Really great event that came out of Sydney on the weekend. And of course, we get our own taste of that at Winton with the Freedom or the Harrop State Race, a 4-hour enduro that's being put on by Dean and Ben Schutz from Ravage Promotions coming up in September, which will be a great event for some of the state-based competitors in Victoria.
Yeah, I'm hoping to have somebody on from there, either Ben or Dean. I mean, they've both been on the show. I have sent a few messages, but they haven't responded at this stage. But it would be good to have them on because that looks an interesting project. Also coming up, of course, we've got the 6-hour relay coming up down at Phillip Island. That's this week. That's this weekend. So it's an event that we've certainly covered. We've certainly covered in the past. It'll be nice and cold down there, but certainly
chilly,
plenty of very, very chilly, very nippy. But it'll be interesting. They always get a really big turnout for that particular event as well. So that's coming up, and so things are starting to ramp up again. We got the state round in in a few weeks out at Sandown with the sports stands, the hot dog round. So get ready for your hit of hot dogs and Anne's lovely carrot cake and all the rest of it. So that's coming up around. So things are slowly starting to ramp up again locally, which is which is good, as we're doing on the show. We're in the studio. A couple of us were in the studio on Tuesday night. We're going in there and doing a few things a bit to prepare for the next series, running a few training things. So keep an eye on the Facebook page on Tuesday night, because we might be jumping in. There might be a surprise show. I mean, it'll be as big a surprise to us as it is to you, but the fact is we've actually got to do a show to do the training, and if we're going to do a show, who knows, we might just happen to throw a switch on it and do it live as well. So Pete, might be an idea to frock up if you're coming in on on Tuesday night, because you might be ending up in front of the camera.
Put your best flannelette on, Pete.
Yeah, get the tux out.
I can see it up there. Put your best.
Get the silicone out. Shine the tyres up a little bit. Mate, got to look schmig.
Television
Tip to toe.
Television's light of night. Let's have a bit of a chat quickly. I think Doc mentioned at some stage Jack Miller. Jack seems to be quite happy about his situation. He's on the move next year, and he's got a longer term contract, and he's very happy about that.
He's got his ship together. He's very happy about his ship being together for the first time in years. He hasn't had a long term contract since his LCR and his Honda days back many moons ago. He said that he's been racing for a long time, 20 years in fact, since he was 7 years of age. So it's good to have some sort of security again, and he uses that ship word a lot in his latest press release and interview. I can't remember, there was I think it's an Australian, the talk or something like that he's was interviewed on, and explained his latest contract switch across KTM. He also did say that he was still welcome and was included as to be a part of the fact he still had a place in the factory Ducati team if he wanted. There was probably some sort of negotiation, but it was still probably most likely going to be on a year-to-year basis, which he hasn't been totally happy about. He said now that he's broken free of that, he said any MotoGP rider that says it doesn't matter, we just go out there and we race and we forget about that, what goes behind the scenes, he said they're talking a lot of rubbish. So 2 years with KTM, wrapped to be there. Said he's looking at really excited about developing the RC16 with them. The talk of the town is who's going to replace him now. There's two of them, the Cassini rider, which I just can't remember his name off the top of my head, and also Jorge Martin from the Pramac squad is also tipped to grab that spot as well too. So yeah, Jack, congratulations to that. So like Formula One, silly season, there's a bit of changing of seats already. I think there was also a bit of talk a little while ago on who's going where, and all the rumours and mills are going left, right, and centre. But we'll probably hear a lot more about it when MotoGP comes down to here in Phillip Island, one of our favourite tracks, and they all love coming over to Australia too, because it's usually tied into the Malaysia rounds and that sort of jazz when it comes to the MotoGP. But yeah,
and you can imagine that Jack would be very, very keen and will be very competitive down at Phillip Island, because it might be for the foreseeable future, it might be his last chance at having a realistic view. Because the KTM has done, has had some reasonable performances, but it's certainly not as competitive at this stage as the Ducati is. So you would imagine that he will be going hell for leather to try and get a win at down at Phillip Island.
Well, Oliveira did well early in the year. Oliveira had a win on the KTM, so the weather, the rain, the tracks, the great equaliser. So it's definitely got some great cornering pace and obviously handling in the right conditions. Just hasn't got any outright speed compared to the couple of big guns, and it's really just a two-horse race at the moment. You've got the Hondas and the Yamahas that are just going for outright speed, and you've got the Ducatis, which are, the Ducatis are going for outright speed and got the horsepower, and, 2 or 3 laps in a row, they will overtake a Honda or a Yamaha on a straight, and then on the cornering, they'll get wiped out again. So, and of course, the other one before we jump off MotoGP is whether Marc Marquez comes back next year. So it's all gone quiet on his injury and since his operation on how his recovery so far. So.
Yeah. So that'll be interesting because he's been very injury prone, and I mean you have to wonder how long he certainly seems to be keen to continue. I mean there seems to be no shortage of courage or determination on his part. You've got to sort of wonder though. I mean how many times can he end up getting beaten up and broken and all that before his body and mind basically says enough. As more motorsport, of course, coming up this week, as Mark's pointing out, the Kenda Tyres 660, some radial racing and that sort of coming from Sydney Dragway over the weekend. That'll be on the Sydney Dragway channel on YouTube. So have a look at that, and I think we've still got some more. We'll probably have stuff from Santa Pod as well, and there's just so much happening. You will have absolutely so much motorsport to have a look at over the weekend. No shortage.
Question for the drag racing uninitiated. I take it a 660 refers to 660 feet, being an eighth of a mile.
Yes.
Or was first to go through 660 Kenda tyres.
Yeah, so it's very.
That'd be 115 HQ Holdens, I think.
Yeah.
You will see plenty of wheels up action
165
there.
165 HQ Holdens.
Fair call.
Sorry.
Good arithmetic.
You will see
with
plenty
with
of
with the 350 Chev option on it. Yes.
Yeah, you'll see plenty of wheels up action there on the weekend. There'll be plenty of fast cars around and plenty of spectacular action happening there at Sydney Dragway, and also it's now been confirmed. All of the dates have been confirmed for the return of the Top Fuel dragsters to Heathcote Park as well. That's all been locked in place now. And I've forgotten. I think if I remember correctly, I think I've got some accommodation booked for somewhere up there for the weekend, but I've sort of forgotten now whether I actually did it. It was so long ago. But anyway,
you're heading up to Bendigo.
Yeah, that's not until October. So that'll be happening. Also heading up in a couple of weeks' time, we'll be heading up to Winton to wave the camera around at the Winton Festival of Speed, probably just on the Friday and Saturday. So that's coming up. And as I said last week on the program, we'll be also be going down. Really looking forward to going down to Baskerville Raceway in Tasmania for the historic Baskerville meeting that's coming up in September as well. So there's plenty of stuff happening on In Pit Lane when we return to Channel 31 in a few weeks' time now. It's coming up very, very, very quickly. So it's suddenly I've gone from having absolutely nothing much to do to being absolutely flat out over the last couple of days as we start to ramp up towards the new season, because there's just way too much paperwork and all that stuff involved. That's the fun part of it.
Is off this week then? Yes.
They're running at Hungaro Ring.
Oh, sorry, Hungarian Grand Prix. That's right.
So they'll be running there, and as we said, Christian Mansell in Formula 3, Jack Doohan running in Formula 2. I think also at Spa, our mate Hugh Barter will be in action. There, and lots of Australians and New Zealanders running around in the Spa 24 hours. The Groves, Brenton and Stephen Grove will be there. Jackson Love, Earl Bamber, all the New Zealand guys will be there. There's quite a turnout of Australians running at the Spa 24 hours. That'll be covered all weekend on the GT World YouTube channel as well. And as I said, coming up, in fact, I'm not sure, it may have even started already tonight. There's Peter Auto, who do the Classic Le Mans and all that, have put together a big field of classic GT cars to celebrate, I think it's 30 years of the SRO. So it'll be going back into the days of the Viper and all of those cars that have run, all those cars that ran in the history of GT racing across the years with SRO will be running around there as well. So a massive weekend of motorsport.
MotoGP's next week at the British GP, which will be Silverstone. So no bikes this week. They'll be next week.
So they'll be there. So so it's all happening. So thanks to Brett saying it'd be good to have us back on 31. Yeah, we're looking forward to it. Might end up being back on 44 in Adelaide as well. They're talking to us as well. We just got to find dot a few I's and cross some T's, and I'm going to get some time to talk to people. Speaking of time, we're going to have to wrap it up on this point, because believe it or not, I actually have an appointment for 10 o'clock tonight online to do something else. So we're going to have to sort of wrap it up a bit bit early tonight. So thanks a lot, guys. Before we go, any last minute stuff? Okay, well, if that's the case, we'll say once again thank you to everybody. Keep up to date with what's happening with the show on the In Pit Lane Facebook page. If you're watching there, have a look on the YouTube channel. Eventually, we'll get back out to the track at some stage. It's been a bit difficult over the past couple of months, but yeah, slowly but surely.
Weather too.
Yeah.
It's pouring rain here now, even so.
I mean, weather. It's been very quiet, and with health reasons and all the rest, I just really haven't had the opportunity of getting out. I was sort of thinking of going down to Richard. Are you going down to the island on the weekend for the 6 hour or?
No, they don't invite me anymore. I did too well last time.
What did you do too wrong? What did you do wrong too well?
They stopped.
I got too many points.
Yeah, but anyway, so a few things coming up. We might see what's happening very soon. We get a camera out and about, and we'll be doing some stuff. But yes, there is some historic stuff coming up around the corner. As I said, we'll definitely be up at Winton. Have managed to find a room at an affordable room up at Wangaratta for the Friday night. So we'll
I got your wang out. Good on you.
Yeah, got the. At Wang, the place, the city that never sleeps, never wakes up, and doesn't do much at all.
I'll look forward to giving you guys at least something of a report from the Phillip Island 6 hour next week. I'll be down there working alongside a number of hard-working Victorian motorsport officials in the race control building. So just want to say a big shout-out to all the competitors who are heading down there this weekend. I hope you have a great time. I look forward not having to dispatch any fire, medical, or recovery efforts in your general direction. So please make sure that you play by all the rules, and you make sure that all your sump plugs are done up nice and tight, and your ball joints are all within spec, and that you keep your tyres nice and pumped up regardless of the weather.
Pumping, plugs, and balls. Okay.
And ball joints, yes. So speaking of ball joints, I've got to be up early in the morning to get mine looked at.
It's okay,
so
folks. It's after the watershed.
It is after the watershed. It is. Okay, everybody. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next week on Full Course Yellow, and coming up soon. Remember, In Pit Lane returning to Channel 31. So we'll see you later. Thanks, everybody. Good night, everyone.
Have a great weekend.